Hello, I'm Kiran and welcome to my woodworking channel. Stay tuned for this build of mid-century modern inspired dining table that I made out of white oak and hickory. I brought my computer down to the shop to make sure I get all the angles accurately, as there are so many angles, and then I marked and cut the templates using the track saw. Rounded off the edges and measured to make sure everything still matches the drawing. As these 8/4 hickory boards are too much for my track saw to edge joint, I tried to skip plane with my planer, but it broke my gib nut, so I cleaned out the surface with an electric hand planer. Squared up the ends and then edge jointed with my track saw. After I got one of the edges clean, I surface jointed with my 6-inch jointer, planed with my brand new Dual 735 planer. I love that new tool smell. Then I laid out the templates on the clean boards and cut them out on the bandsaw. This is nearly 7/4 hard lumber. I'm surprised how well my bandsaw performed. For what it costs, it's an awesome bang for the buck. Here are all the legs roughly cut. I'm truing up the legs with 3 router bits. Normally I do 2, but since this is pretty thick, I decided to go with 2 pattern bits and a flush trim bit. So round 1 of routing. Round 2 of routing. So the template is still on while I'm routing with the pattern bits, and then I take it off for the flush trim bit. And the final round. Then I took on the arduous task of sanding everything clean and cleaning out the burn marks with the card scraper. Where there were some minor voids, I put some CA glue and sanded it flush. Back at the router table, I added a rounder to all the legs and got them ready for mortising. The idea is to get a profile like this for each side of the upper and lower parts of the leg. Have 4 domino holes. So 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Because the holes are tightly placed, it's important to repeatedly drill in the same spot in one of the legs and then transfer the marking to the lower part of the leg. So what I've done is adjusted my square here. The 9 centimeter mark and the 12 centimeter mark will always give me these spacings, these 2 right here. So I marked and cut the front facing dominoes on upper and lower parts of the leg. For the test fit, I'm using these test dominoes, which are essentially sanded off the corners from the standard dominoes so that dry assembly is a little bit easier. Goes like that, goes like that, and okay, so this works. Now I'm going to use this as a reference to mark out the lines on the other side to repeat the same process. So this way there's no shifting of anything. It's going to stay stable and give me the exact markings that I want. Normally, if you're doing this on a wider piece, you can drill all the dominoes at once, with some dominoes drilled at loose settings. But since I don't have that much space, I had to drill all of them with tight setting. There's only so much you can do by hand. Then you need to kind of bring in your clamping blocks and clamps. So this is not even glued in and it's plenty strong. A little game of dominoes before the glue up. If you're enjoying this build, please consider subscribing to my channel. And here are all 4 legs clamped up. I built 3 jigs over the course of this project, and here is the first jig. This is a sled to square up the part of the leg that joins the centerpiece. And I cut this in 2 passes. That's a good tight fit. And then I went on to cut the center piece that joins all 4 legs together. I cut it as a 1 long piece and then split it into 2 with the crosscut sled. Then I temporarily glued the centerpiece with the 2 legs, drilled 2 holes and added 2 screws to get me the consistent positioning when I actually come back with the glue to glue it permanently. And then I glued it up, added the screws back on as clamps and let it dry. Now onto the quick dry fit. This is where it's starting to take shape of a base. So far it's been an abstract idea. And once the glue dried, I came back with the dominoes and added 2 domino holes because this is an end grain to long grain joint, so you will need additional joinery to help support. I cut off the excess dominoes and cleaned everything out with a chisel. Cleaned out all the dust particles and went on to add the finish, which is a mixture of polyurethane and mineral oil thinned down by mineral spirits. I added a total of 3 coats and gently sanded in between the coats like this to make sure that all the dust nips were gone. And then I drilled hole in all the legs to install the T-nuts for the leveling feet and added some epoxy and glued it in. On to the final glue up of the legs. This will be long grain to long grain glue up, so I initially only added the glue and secured with clamps. I checked the sides to make sure that the top of the base was level with the bottom of the feet. If they are, you know you've done a good job. Once the glue dried, I removed all the clamps and drilled 3 holes and hammered in 3 dowel rods. Peeling the dry glue off of the silicone brush has to be one of Woodworking's oddly satisfying things. The dowels add some additional strength to the center joinery. The leveling feet were a little too long, so I just cut them back a little bit to fit snugly. After the glue dried, I sanded all the dowels flush. Then I cut and perfectly fit the 2 tabletop supports and attached them to the table legs. Added some screws to temporarily hold them while the glue dried and reinforced them with dowels. I decided to make the top from these quarter-sawn white oak slabs. Took all of them through the milling process as usual with the track saw, the table saw, the jointer, and the planer. Also, this involved the second jig that I built, a jointer sled for my new planer. You know it's going to be a good looking joint when you can't see the seam line. I'm gluing up in stages with 2 boards at a time due to the space limitation in my shop. So I added the dominoes for the alignment. If you notice, they're mostly in the middle of the board because eventually I'll be cutting the tabletop into an oval shape and I don't want to hit any dominoes. On to the glue up of the first panel. Who wore purple better here? Me or the stack of drywalls behind me? Let me know in the comments. And just like that, through the magic of editing, I have all 3 panels. I cleaned out all the glue squeeze out and got them prepped one more time through the planer to get them ready for final glue up. And then I converted my shop into what I call as a no turn back mode. So I put a piece of melamine on top of my table saw and outfeed table so those tools cannot be used, and then I lined up the clamps. This made for a very cramped situation. There's literally no space to move around, and I had all kinds of mobility issues with my apron getting snagged and bumping my feet and arms everywhere. So I indiscriminately carpet bombed my workshop with F-bombs. The reason that I was able to assemble this at all is because I have my workbench and all my tools on casters. It seems like such a great idea for workshops small and big. I'm yet to meet a woodworker who said don't put your tools on casters. You know it's getting serious when I had to remove my apron in frustration. I can laugh about it now, but I can tell you I wasn't laughing when I was assembling this. I also worked on my ninja-like crawling skills. Once I got the top glued up, I cleaned out all the glue squeeze outs as much as possible with a wet rag to get the tabletop as clean as possible for the sanding. Two rounds of sanding and some card scraper work here to get the top clean. On to the final jig that I built for this project to cut a large circle or an oval. I might release a video of how I made it and how it works, but for now I marked the apogee and perigee to line up with the router bit, and then I cut it out. After 3 passes I got a good elliptical pattern. Then I could cut the rest off and come back with a pattern bit to flush trim it. You could cut the whole thing out with a router, but I decided to use my palm router, which isn't super powerful, and I didn't want to push it beyond its limits. I tried to use the jigsaw, but it wasn't going anywhere, so I put a stand next to my bandsaw and cut the rest off with the bandsaw. Passes with a pattern bit and a flush trim bit to get the tabletop perfectly elliptical. And then I put it on the router table to add a big chamfer under the tabletop. This will give a lighter mid-century modern look to the tabletop, still retaining the thickness. Cleanup of all the burn marks with a card scraper and a sander. It's these finishing touches that take a long time. Not the glue up, not the joinery, not the milling process. But also they are the reasons why a final product looks great and takes the finish really well. Hooray! More sanding, and I sanded the top all the way to 320 grits and cleaned everything out with mineral spirits and added the finish, which again is a mixture of poly and mineral oil thinned down with mineral spirits. I added a total of 4 coats and sanded lightly in between to remove all the dust nibs. After the top coat fully cured, I cleaned everything out, put some paste wax and then buffed it out. I used a buffing pad for my sander. You could buff it by hand. Just put some elbow grease into it. Once the top was completed, I brought the base in and appropriately aligned it and screwed it in. With that done, this project is complete. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.